Welcome, I'm Michael Bickert. Thanks for joining me today as we explore concepts with the objective of improving your management skills and growing your business. Pause the video so that you can grab a notepad and a pen because I want you to commit to yourself that you will jot down some kind of note, an action item, something that you will implement in your business today. All right. Should you be transitioning in part or entirely to a remote work environment? This is a question to which the answer is yes. Definitively, yes, you should be. Now, that might surprise some of you where you might think it's impractical. Remember, I said in part or entirely. It may be impractical for you to transition entirely to a remote work environment for your specific business, but to the extent that you can at all, in any way, you should. You have to consider what constraints you have on the logistics of your business in delivering your product or service to your customers, and can you at least partially transition to a more remote work environment. Let's consider this. We've got to start with asking good questions all the time when we consider these business concepts. So why would you want to transition to a remote work environment at all? And you got to consider what are the benefits of it. So the first thing is savings, expense control. Are you is a portion of your business dedicated to housing staff who could otherwise be working from home? So maybe you're paying for office space for people that can do a job that they could do remotely and do just as well. Or maybe portions of their job could be, and maybe you could share space. The first benefit to a remote work environment is the savings on real estate. So if you can take your entire business and work from a home office as opposed to paying rent for some expensive office space, shop space, or something like that, then you should. So when you're considering these benefits and if you're considering these concepts, instead of just writing them off and instead of asking the question, should you, let's take it from the perspective of mental exercise. What if you had to? What if it was mandated? You have to work remotely. And some people are sort of facing that. And the business that I run had for many years been run out of a specific location, and then I relaunched it a few years ago, and I decided at that time that the future was going to be more of a remote work environment, that was going to happen more and more. And so I decided I was going to design my processes entirely around that. And I encouraged my team, whenever possible, do everything in a virtual context so that we can practice and we can develop processes and tools and figure out what are the challenges so we can overcome them, and then we can recommend that kind of thing to other businesses. And there were some challenges, but I found, like so many things, that's founded in a paradigm and a preconceived notion of how something should be done. So that's what I'm asking you to do for today's mental exercise, is sort of check your preconceived notions at the door and forget about the practicality for a moment and just pretend that you have to. You have to work remotely. How could you do it? What would that involve? And for each of you, it's going to be different, of course, because some of you need your customers to come to where you are, or I'm using that word need, I guess, a little loosely. It is always been that your customers come to you. Maybe you could go to your customers. That's a more remote work environment. And we would have to look at what kind of value does that provide, and is it practical? I have one particular business that I've worked with, and this individual I can see completely should be transitioning to a more remote work environment and closing down some brick and mortar locations and be able to run things where you can rely much more on delivery to customers. And you're seeing that in the restaurant industry. I'm now hearing about restaurants that are opening or are transitioning entirely away from their dining rooms. So they're becoming just a kitchen that prepares meals, and they deliver those meals through the various services in the gig economy, such as Uber Eats and Skip the Dishes and those types of things. So this is happening. People who never thought that they would ever do this, out of necessity, are making that transition. And when you think about business and how it works, is you want to do things before they become necessary. You don't want to have to do things immediately, urgently, because you won't be able to do them as efficiently and as well planned and organized as you otherwise would. So spend some time right now and consider. So in my example of the gentleman that I worked with, as well as some of these examples of restaurants, really what it would be about is transitioning that logistical, operational workspace to less expensive real estate. So instead of being in this prime location on a corner where a restaurant might have to, a retail location, brick and mortar location would ordinarily thrive, if you are bringing your product or service to your customer, now it no longer matters. Well, to a much lesser degree does it matter where you're actually doing the production, where you're preparing. In my one example, the food could be prepared somewhere, it could be out of a home kitchen, but it might be still out of a more industrial kitchen facility in an area where the rents are much cheaper because they're not in prime retail locations. So think about that. Are you occupying prime real estate and you're paying for it? And could you be bringing down your rent factor as one of the expenses? And then whatever it is that you are paying, what are you paying for? Like, do you need as much space as you have? So I think I'm harping on that because this is obviously the biggest benefit in terms of expense control, is reducing your rent factor, reducing the expense burden on your business of prime real estate and housing people. And I'm saying housing people, but you know what I mean. Providing a place, some office space for people to work or to perform something. So there's two concepts that we've kind of covered so far, just to review, is one, could those people be working from home, which would be entirely that it would entirely save the space, and perhaps you could reduce your rent by having a smaller space. Or could you move to a location that's less sought after and has a much lower square footage rental factor? So the biggest benefit is reducing expenses by not having to pay as much for rent. The second biggest benefit that I see is opening up the talent pool for recruitment. You can now open up to the entire world what you ordinarily may have needed to recruit from a talent pool very locally to perform certain activities, certain jobs, certain tasks within your business. Now, again, this isn't ubiquitous. It's not right across the board every single staff member that you might be recruiting for. Some of them may need to be local. In the example where I gave, where you might move a facility off the beaten path a little bit to save rent, you may still need boots on ground employees working there, and that's fine. But those people that can do their jobs from home, now your talent pool is the best and the brightest anywhere that you can find them, in any country. And this is something that really is a great benefit to you. And also you might be able to save some money on that. Maybe somebody who is working from another country where the standard of living is fine with a lower income, is willing to work for less. Or you might have people who are willing to work for less even in your country because they are free to live in a more rural environment where their cost of living is lower, and so they can have a good standard of living even though they're accepting a lower salary. And also these people, based on the flexibility that you're affording them are often willing to take less salary as well. So again, we have that expense control on your people by transitioning to remote work, but also you open up the talent pool and you can try to acquire talent from just a much greater sea of talent than you otherwise would if you were restricted to someone who lives close to your business. That's the second big benefit. The third big benefit I would see in transitioning to a partial or an entire remote work environment would be the benefits of working from home or working from a more convenient location. And so one of the things that I noticed throughout many years is people would often apply to work at the brick and mortar location that I was managing based on their proximity. Or conversely, if they did not, they chose the job, I'd often lose them to the competition when they decided it was no longer worth the commute and they'd prefer to work somewhere closer to home. It's a big deal in large cities where, you know, especially if you have weather seasonality where weather really affects traffic, and or if it's a type of city where you have really congested traffic patterns, and this is very frustrating for people. So much of their time is spent on the commute and that affects the quality of their life. And so once again, you're able to provide to your people, but also to yourself, maybe a greater quality of life by being able to avoid that commute. Also, you can organize your day very autonomously. You can have freedom, scheduling freedom. And so maybe in between meetings, in between tasks that you're working on or whatever, you're not having to run to a restaurant, to a fast food restaurant to grab lunch. You're not having to prepare meals and bring them into work and all that goes along with that. You can just pop into the kitchen and make yourself something. So there's lots of convenience in terms of the working remotely from home that people benefit from, including yourself. So that's something you might want to consider. So the three big benefits so far we've talked about is decreasing expenses, primarily your rent factor, real estate expenses. Secondly, you can sometimes save on the amount that you're paying for salary expense, for employment expense. The second big benefit is being able to recruit from a talent pool that's open literally globally to for some of these fully remote positions. And then a better lifestyle, being able to avoid a commute and be able to have some more flexibility with your schedule. And that leads to not the next benefit, but rather to the consideration of, well, how do I know whether this is practical, or what do I need to put in place to make this happen? And I want to just let you know that if this is a little daunting, that's okay. Don't be afraid of the idea. Remember, we're doing a mental exercise here where you are considering, what if I had to do this? And before you just sort of become defeatist and say, well, it's not worth it. This is just hypothetical and I don't need to. I'm telling you, you should be doing this mental exercise because I would encourage you to do at least some remote transition to remote work environment so that you can get some of these benefits before your competition does. Because this is the way the world is going. You need to stay in front of trends, and you want to make sure that you run an operation that takes advantage of the things that are available to you in terms of efficiencies in running a business in the modern world. So let's look at some of the things that you would have to consider. The first thing you have to consider is the logistical processes and who can work remotely, what things can be done remotely in terms of everything that you do for your business. What could be done on a remote and a virtual work environment, and what things have to be done in a specific location, and how do you interact with customers? Can you move some of that stuff online? Can you automate many of those things, or do you need to have face-to-face interactions? And once you start to organize these things, you separate them out, and that's where you will be able to ascertain the degree to which you can make this transition and which things have to stay more brick and mortar, more face-to-face, more real world, tangible world, as opposed to the virtual work environment. So the organization is the first thing you need to sort of plan out. Just grab a notepad and a pen and start jotting things down. What do you do each day? And could this be done from anywhere? Does it need to be done in the specific location you are now? Could it be moved to a different location? Could it be done from home? All of your people. Another way you could do this is you could just take a list of all your people and ask, do each of these people need to work in their existing location, or are you doing that because that's the way you've always done it? Are you doing it because you just sort of figured, well, that's we're all going to meet at work, so that's how we do things? Or is there a practical reason that they have to do that, or could they work from home? So sort of organize this. That's the next step. What you're going to need are some tools and technology to support you in this. And there's just, of course, so many things, and you can do virtual video conferencing now, meeting with, literally up to 100 or more people can meet at once in a virtual environment. You can have meetings in a virtual environment. You can have sales sessions and sell to your customers in a virtual, still asynchronous environment, an on-demand environment, or asynchronous environment. There's all these choices available to you with some of the video conferencing tools. And then there's software that you may have to increase your investment in software. So this is something that might offset some of the savings that you realized on real estate and employment expense, but you are going to need some good tools. Reach out to us. We provide a full service that we can help you organize and transition in part or entirely to a remote work environment, depending on your business. Reach out to us. We have all of the tools. We have the expertise to be able to figure out exactly and know what you're going to run into. One of the things you're going to do and you're going to benefit from is automation. You're going to probably, because you have these tools now in place, you're going to automate so many things that you may have relied on people before, and that may offset the tools that'll enable the automation will probably offset the cost of the tools, because you can maybe bring down your employment expense a little bit more because of the automation. And this can be a little bit daunting for you as a manager, and maybe your people might be getting nervous where they're thinking, oh, wow, my employment security is in question here. But what you will really do is you will start to look at what things should be automated and what things could you be automating so that you can make better use of your people's time and have them work on growing your business. Maybe some things, and instead of having people feel insecure that they're going to be displaced or replaced by the technology, you can explain to them, no, we're going to dedicate your talents to those things that are best left to human beings. We're going to automate some of the processes, and a company like ours can help you with all of this and do what we call some process mapping, and then create blueprints and automations that just make things go very, very smoothly. And one of the nice things about automation is that the computer doesn't make mistakes. In Management 101, we talk about step number 3, where you need to assume that the people responsible for carrying out specific tasks will at least some of the times fail you. Well, technology doesn't. A computer just does what it's supposed to do each and every time. Now, there are other glitches you can run into when you change processes and that kind of thing, but I digress. So there was just one more benefit that you're probably going to realize, both in cost savings and then efficiency, which can add value. Another consideration you need to have for what it's going to take to be able to transition to remote work environments, in part or entirely, will have to do with the cultural experience and letting go of some preconceived notions again of how business needs to take place. The remote work environment is so much more autonomous. Of course, you're not standing there and you're not managing by walking around and visiting with your people as frequently and speaking with them face to face. So you may have to let go of any kind of micromanagement mentality you have, and you may have to build greater trust. You will have to ensure that you work with people that you can trust. And what is probably necessary is engaging more in task-based commensurate value exchange. And what I mean by that is, instead of focusing on, well, this person put in so many hours and therefore you pay them X number of dollars, you very closely define what's expected in each and every role and what value they bring. What is the outcome? What is the result you're looking for? What accomplishment of an objective are you looking for from that position? And insofar as that is accomplished consistently, that person earns their pay. And really, do you care how long it took them to do it? I mean, think about it in your existing location. People are wasting time. We know that. There is muda inherent in all processes, and you're not standing over top of anyone in your brick and mortar location making sure that they're always engaged and productive. It's the same thing in a remote work environment. However, now you realize it sort of forces you into that realization that we need to focus on, what does this person do? What objectives do they accomplish on behalf of the business? What value do they add? And let's just define that very clearly and make sure the person is consistently producing that in exchange for the remuneration that they receive. And it's really a culture change and a mentality change for you as a manager. But this is really important, and the degree to which you can put these things in place and make those cultural changes and have the trust and well define what it is that people are meant to accomplish will determine your success in making this transition. Again, can be daunting, can be a little bit difficult to imagine. Reach out to us. We will help you with this. If this is something that you would like some assistance with, we can help you document those processes and define the tasks and do the automation and this kind of thing. And as always, with everything in your business, you need to consider the value for your customer. And we've talked a little bit about lowering your expenses, and that speaks to the constituent, one of the four main constituents of value, which is pricing. If you can lower your expenses, you might be able to offer a more competitive price to your customer. But don't forget about convenience, your customer experience, the other constituents of value, and making sure that you're delivering to your customer, not literally necessarily, although you may literally be delivering your product as opposed to having it picked up. You have to deliver your customer experience. You have to deliver on that convenience factor. You have to deliver that quality they've come to expect, and you have to deliver on offering real value in terms of your pricing. So those four main constituents of value where you have to focus when you're organizing this and planning this transition. You want to make sure that you're not compromising anything, at least without offsetting it in another way. So if you are reducing value in convenience, then you've got to at least make sure that the price is reflecting that. Or if the customer experience is impacted adversely in any way, you want to make sure that you are improving value in another way. So think about these things. And it's really difficult for me to give examples with so many different types of businesses, but we've talked about, well, what about your processes and your production processes and the logistics of running your business? But one of the most important parts of that is the customer interaction. So you probably are going to have things more done online. Maybe you're going to have bookings that are taking place online and scheduling appointments with your customers, and payment gateways and portals where invoicing, all this kind of stuff can take place automatic. That's very convenient for customers. They're becoming more and more familiar with that. It's becoming more ubiquitous, and people are maybe coming to expect it. And this is a good time to try to do some of those things. So as we wrap up today, I want you to consider piloting some of these things. Like, you don't have to go and make a commitment that you're going to do this overnight. Why not pilot this? Why not take one obvious area of your business? It might be a particular team member, an employee who's like, well, this person probably could work from home. Or this is an area we could outsource. Maybe somebody's has been laid off or something like that, and before you went and hired them back, you think, this might be something that we could transition to outsourcing, something like that. give some thought to piloting a little portion of this and working remotely. When you're doing that homework and you're organizing and something occurs to you and you go, you know what, we could do this part. And before you're looking at, signing a lease in a different location or letting go of a lease that you've, because you're going to transition into home or whatever, before, hopefully that timing isn't immediate where you have to make that decision overnight. You make better decisions when you have time. You can pilot this by trying this in stages, in small, and then get some feedback. Any kind of pilot program and operation, you can get stakeholder feedback, and like I did with my company, is figure out what challenges you have. How do the meetings go? How are they more effective? How are they not as effective? What are your client or customer interactions like? And in which ways would you want to improve those? How do you protect your brand? All these kind of things you can ask, and it's okay to make some mistakes. It's perfectly fine. You're doing this, remember, the objective of doing this is to thrive, to grow your business. And if you fail to try to make some of these innovations, and your competition does, and the degree to which they do it successfully and lower their expenses or become more streamlined while you're doing things quote unquote antiquated or the old way, then you might be in real trouble. You need to ask yourself, can you do this? Should you do this? But let's remember the mental exercise. Pretend that you're mandated, you have to do it, and then consider engaging in some sort of a pilot program where you do this in part, just a little section of your business. And I think you're going to be surprised and find that it goes much smoother than you realize. And you're going to see some benefits that I didn't cover today that are specific to your business, and you're going to want to do more and more of this. I want to remind you and encourage you once again to reach out to BMI if you'd like some help with this. We can very reasonably help you do this. Certainly the cost of engaging us will be far less than the cost that you're going to save. I can guarantee you that. So that's where we're going to leave it today. I just wanted to sort of scratch the surface of this idea of transitioning your business to a more remote work environment in part or entirely. And I'm curious if you've done any of this. Are you considering this? Is it completely impractical? Do you have a kind of business where you just don't see how this can work at all and challenge me? Or do you think this is a bad thing entirely for society and for businesses and where things are going? I'm curious about what you've done, what experiences you've had. We all need to learn from one another. So please leave a comment. Perpetual refinement.